Hello and welcome to Skeindeer Knits. My name is Ellie and I am a Norwegian living and knitting in London. You can find me as a designer on Ravelry under the name Skeindeer Knits, and you can find me on Instagram as Skeindeer. But most importantly of all is joining the Ravelry group Skeindeer Knits, which is the best place to take part in knit-alongs, talk about knitting and colour work and whatnot, and yeah, it's a pretty good group and it's the best place to get in touch. I have said it a couple of times, but it bears repeating that I'm not the best with messages. I do put higher priority on the few pattern support messages I get, but messaging me on social media is not necessarily fruitful. But if you do need help, then the group is really the best place to go. Obviously, if you have any private or business inquiries, then email or Ravelry messages will do. Just thought I'd remind you of that in case anyone's upset that I am yeah, it's a lot going on here lately, and I'm going on vacation next week, so yeah, there's the Rose Retreat where I'm going to be teaching colour work mittens. Oh, gotta prepare for that. But yeah, it's gonna be a retreat first and foremost. I will be relaxing and just, yeah, probably hiding away in some sort of shade or air conditioned area because I don't really do heat. So why am I going? I don't know. To enjoy the company of other knitters, probably. Yeah. So yeah, slightly different setup here today. If you're a regular viewer, you will realize I've just kind of turn the angle around a little bit. I like doing that. I like experimenting. Most of the time I have my camera turned that way because there's nice daylight coming in there, but we got a lot of daylight today and it's kind of unpredictable, so I'm relying on my studio light and my other window. And yeah, and if you are a new viewer, you probably don't care, so welcome. I'm going to cover a bit of admin in the beginning as I normally do, and then I will get into the blabber about what I am knitting and stuff. So yeah, the admin. First of all, thank you so much for your support last week. I was a bit scared of putting all of that out there. In case you haven't watched last week's episode, I mean, you can go back and watch it, but I'm going to fill in briefly. I had to change the name of my pattern due to a trademark issue, which the company in question kind of just made me do, because otherwise they would use their, you know, slightly greater resources than mine to win through anyway, even though technically you can't by registering a trademark just have copyright no word. It's not the same thing. So while I was kind of in my rights, I still had to change it because it's really not worth the fight for me. It's not that important, but it means that I would be losing a lot of my promotion work, and so really you guys are the only people who can help me with kind of regaining that, and you totally have. Thank you. So what I asked last week was for people to change their pattern names on Ravelry, to change their hashtags on social media, and you totally come through, and oh my god, you are amazing. Thank you. And just for all your voices of support in the comment sections, you're the best. Thank you. I couldn't have hoped for more. If you are still new to all of this, please do watch at the beginning of last week's episode. I talk about in more depth there. If you have bought the pattern, there is even more information in the private message that I sent out to all pattern buyers of that particular sweater, in case you're wondering what sweater I'm talking about. Yeah, so I'm going to lay that discussion dead now. Also kind of adding that, you know, there were some things I didn't touch upon in last week's episode deliberately, so hopefully you can understand why, given this is kind of a bit of a legal issue. So when someone chooses to supplement that information in the comment section, I'm sorry, I can't really allow that. There was a reason why, you know, there were some things kind of left unsaid, even if it's easy to find out. I'm not trying to be mysterious, but like, it should be fairly obvious why, so hopefully you understand. And yeah, thank you so much. In terms of new hashtags, I prefer if you use Vinterfjell yoke or Vinterfjell cal if you're taking part in the knit along, or Vinterfjell sweater. I have seen a lot of people use hashtag Vinterfjell only. That causes a bit of confusion because it's also just a word in Norway. So if you would use a more specific hashtag instead or in addition to Vinterfjell, that would be awesome. Thank you. I'm not the hashtag police, it's just something that occurred to me could lead to more confusion, which is why I suggested some specific hashtags. But anyway, regardless, you guys have been tremendous help and I couldn't have asked for anything better. but I do also want to add to those that maybe put some question marks to what I said last week. I have researched this quite a bit. I did before I launched the pattern name, the first pattern name. I certainly have after I was being pressured into changing it. I am well aware of pretty much every aspect now after talking to numerous people and looking this up, and it's just how it had to be. So hopefully you understand, and hopefully everyone hopefully everyone appreciates this new angle, because you can see lots of other cool things in the background here. You have seen the yarn, the whole plastic wrapped yarn that I have to wrap in plastic to avoid the moths and the nargles. I do get the odd comment, someone saying that you should really get rid of all the plastic in the background. It's not very pretty. It's not there for aesthetic reasons, okay? So, and here are some of my knitting publications and booklets and whatnot. I keep the books up there, but you can't see that shelf. I also have a lot of yarn up here, which I'm going to talk about in this episode. Some pretty flower from Tesco, very fancy. And I have my moving calendar. I have some knitting cards. I think the one with the poos says knit happens. And I got some shade cards from Rauma, because Rauma is probably the yarn I use the most. And so it's nice to be able to see the colours in person, because I can't just pop into a Norwegian yarn shop now that I live in London. I hope you can hear the birds singing. It's really nice. I can hear them. It's just quite pleasant. Right, this is a very babbly introduction. I am hosting a number of knit-alongs. That's usually why I direct you towards the Ravelry group Skeindeer Knits, because I'm hosting the sock-along. I was going to decide on a closing date. If I have decided by the time I edit, it will be written here. If I haven't, I haven't. Yeah, it's just a cal for knitting my sock patterns. I did come up with the publication of some very quick and easy sock patterns in very memorizable color work repeats a while ago, and those are eligible. I also have some single sock patterns, Transcendence, the ones with all the blue and stuff, and Starby socks, the red ones, and the kind of pink and grey white Colour Your World socks, which are really good for scraps, like all sorts of scraps. And you can use superwash yarn with nylon for all of them. Like when it comes to socks, you often have to compromise, because sock yarns are rarely non-superwash. They're very rarely woolen spun, so you just kind of have to use what you find, and it's fine. You can, you know, as you know, Caitlin Hunter's shown, use pretty much any yarn for colour work. It just depends on the desired effect. And with socks, my desired effect is for them to last. So there. I am also hosting the year-long knit-along, which has lasted for 5 months already. Oh my goodness, I need to get on it. I mean, I am gonna get on it because I'm making the sock club soon, the end of the year, autumn. Yeah, the only goal is to make 6 pairs of colourwork mittens for the duration of 2018. They can't have been begun before the end of the beginning of the year, and they can't not be finished by the end of the year. Could I have phrased that more complicatedly? No. And I am also hosting it along for the Vinterfjell sweater. So that is the sweater that has changed the name to Vinterfjell, and it's closing up. I had initially said I was going to have basically the beginning of June as the closing deadline. I'm happy to extend that to the end of June. I'm just gonna await any feedback. If you still feel like you need more time, please do let me know. I have never been the kind of person to kind of rush people in it along, to just be like, yeah, well, the deadline is done, so you just have to finish, as if like it doesn't benefit any of us that it's chop chop chop, that you're not going to enjoy it, that you feel like you're knitting for a deadline. I mean, to some extent deadlines are good, just because it, you know, prevents some of us from casting all the things, but I do, you know, it's mine and everyone's interest that so as many as possible manages to cast on and finish in time for the deadline. So I'm thinking end of June. Thoughts? And I think after that solid chunk of babble, I can jump into finished objects, which shouldn't really be called finished objects because it's just one, well, arguably two. It's a pair of socks. These are my sparkly bee socks, which I have just affectionately called them. They are Crackle and Burn by EasyKnitter, who sometimes go by EasyKnits, but I think it's EasyKnitter. He's a UK dyer. And I love these so much. They are superwash merino nylon and stellina, so they sparkle like crazy. Hopefully you can see that despite the shade of the tripod. That's one of the downsides of studio light. We'll get predictable, stable light, but if I do this, you know, just how it is. I should get one of those light rings around the camera. They're very flattering, but money. about the socks. Boop boop. I don't really have a go-to vanilla sock recipe just because I'm not really a vanilla sock knitter. It's just something I've dabbled into this year. I kind of got the toe recipe sort of from Amy of the Stranded podcast, but I do prefer make one left and make one right instead of yarn over that are knitted twisted. That's just me. But I think I use the same increase rate, which is like start off with 12 stitches, then you increase to 36 on every row and then every other row until you have your desired stitch count, which in this case was 64, which I hope will work out. I've been experimenting back and forth between 60 and 64, and it does seem to depend a lot on the thickness of the yarn whether it works. Like with Felici that was a bit too much, but with my the Christmas socks, the Santa's Workshop, that was a bit snug. They still fit really well, so I seem to be good with 60, and I am doing that on a very tight gauge, which is like kind of my main concern when I do socks. When I hear about these very small stitch counts, I'm worried that people are starting to like fall under the golden 30 stitches by 10 centimeter standard, which I think we should all stick to if you want our socks to last. So these are very densely knit. I use 2.5 needles to knit really densely because I'm a tight knitter. This is why you will never hear me talk about the chosen needle size, because it's really just non-information. I don't think any podcaster should really just say with no context what needle size they use. Pretty much always say what gauge you use. Now of course I haven't actually measured the gauge of these, but I reckon it's about 32 to 34 stitches per 4" 10 centimeters, I think. But obviously it will vary a bit as well when I wear them because they stretch out, and it's just kind of how it is. But yeah, I don't really like talking about needle size because it's different for everyone. If someone comes to me like, hey Ellie, what needles did you use for that thing? I want to make that thing. I'm just not going to tell you because we all knit with different tension. And if I told you that I knit my mittens with a 3mm, I guarantee that the vast majority of you would get huge mittens. Very few make colorwork mittens with about 64 stitches is usually my golden standard there as well. Very few can do those with 3mm unless they're making mittens for adults. I just knit tight. There's nothing wrong with that. There isn't any right gauge for a given needle size and yarn weight. And also sometimes I get asked, you know, can I use yarn of that weight instead of that weight? I can't really tell you that because there isn't really a given answer as to what gauge that weight will lead to. You could really knit different weights to the same gauge, and gauge is really all that matters. So I'm just gonna have to give the same answer that I give most of the time, which is if the answer can be swatch, then the answer is probably swatch, and when you swatch you measure your gauge, and that is usually how you can find the answers to all of these things. Sorry, it's a boring answer. We don't like to swatch. I found that the best way to make myself want to swatch is when I have who knows how many works in progress, usually over 20, and I know I can't cast anymore, but I've just bought this yarn I really want to work with. That is when I want to swatch, because it's not technically casting on, it's just a swatch. So I can swatch with it, but not start a project. It's pretty clever, I should try that. Right, I was talking about these socks. That was the toe, and the heel is my just favorite, which is a regular gusset worked up to here, kind of shallow, then you work half a German short row heel, and then you work up the heel flap where you knit it together in SSK with the sides here. That is the best way I can put it, and if you want to know more about it, I have put it in a paid for pattern of mine, the Sarbu socks. Not really prepared to share that given it's in a pattern that I rely on for my livelihood, so hopefully you understand that, but you can find it there anyway. And I will be using it for future patterns as well because I really do love that heel. It's very nice and roomy because it's got all that shorter volume and also the gusset, but the gusset is shallow enough to not actually interrupt the stripes. So you can see that orange stripe isn't actually that much thinner from these orange stripes. And even better, if I use a contrast colour for the heel, you know, the grey area and the yellow area and part of the black area, I would actually have had a continuous striping here as well. You wouldn't get that repeat of the black and the orange, which I think I'll do in the future. So I do have a bit of leftovers, so if I have a contrast colour maybe that will work out. I'm gonna have to weigh it. If I had 50 grams, that would be perfect, but I don't think this is 50 grams. Oh dear. In the end, I wrapped the whole thing up with doing a 1x1 cuff. They seem to work out well for me. I mean, twisted will be okay too. Twisted is pretty, but effort. So this is just what I ended up doing. I will be submitting these to the Stripey Sock Along, or whatever it's called, by Pin Feathers and Pearls, which is a great podcast that you should check out, of course, if you haven't already. She's been in the game for way longer than I have, so you've probably already seen it. And yeah, she has a sock knit along for striping socks, and it wraps up at the end of the month. I thought it was wrapping up at the 18th, so I was just prepared to sit and knit that last sock until I'd fall over dead at like midnight Calgary time, but I found out in the last minute that I didn't have to, so I went to bed instead. But now they're done. Sparkly bee socks in their Crackle and Burn colourway. So much sparkle. And the blockers are the Bryson / Bryspun blockers that I have bought at Loop London. I use the largest ones because I really want to stretch out my socks properly. I've seen some just use sizes that correspond to their foot sizes, but I really feel like you should get blockers that stretch out your socks. Okay, before work in progress, I just want to talk about a day that happened last week. It was May 17th. Gosh, what's going on here? What is this? Oh dear, let's just hide that. If you don't know already, or from last year's May 17th, that is a holiday in Norway. It is actually our Constitution Day. I did not really document anything for it for this podcast, so I'm just going to talk about it for a bit, but you'll probably find out something about it from, say, maybe the Nordic Stitches or Arctic Knitting podcasts. But yeah, it's a national holiday in Norway. It's the Constitution Day, and it's just a very adorable day. It's very, very different from pretty much every Constitution Day I know about in the world, because it primarily focuses on children and music and food and marching bands and just like how many ice creams you could eat a day. I think also the podcast Salapalooza covered that pretty well. Her description was very on point. It's primarily focused on children. There are children's parades. There will be local ones for the school district that you belong to, and they will also all gather downtown and march. So there tends to be one march like 7 o'clock in the morning on a national holiday. We have a day off. My dad used to hate that. And then you take the whole bus load with kids on a day that everyone wants to go downtown, so there's a bit of a queue there. And then they go out and they march more, about 9 in the morning or 10 or so. And then you take them all back again to march during the day when more people are awake, and you do lots of fun games like jumping around in potato sacks, because how else are you gonna know who's the best at jumping around in potato sacks? And running around with a spoon in your mouth with an egg on the spoon, hoping that it's not gonna fall over and crack. There's a lot of activities that are similar to a Swedish holiday, Midsummer, their holiday. We do a lot of the same activities, always hoping for good weather, because it's very much an outdoors day, which is quite unusual in Norway. It's pretty much the only time when you go there you're gonna find Norwegians talking to strangers and smiling to strangers and just being generally like hooray in your face. And I really love it, and it's the one thing I miss the most from Norway. I have had one Norwegian May 17th celebration since moving to London 7 years ago, but most of the time I just have to go down to Southwark Park here in London and see all the Norwegian expats meet up and sing the national holiday in the middle of London, wearing national costumes and having all the kids, you know, playing all those games and bringing their flags and eating all those treats. And a big goal and rule for May 17th is that you can eat as much ice cream as you want, and you should. I only had one ice cream, but I had Norwegian ice cream. No idea how they managed to bring it to London frozen, but whoever's doing that, good on you. And I got waffles, and I got hot dog and a potato wrap, because that is the thing we do. There's a bit miffed that I didn't get fried onion with it, like, you know, dried fried onion. Oh well, can't have everything, but I was really happy with it. The weather was gorgeous, and I wish I had a bunad, you know, the fall costumes that they wear, but they are so expensive. They are crazy expensive. They represent where you are from in Norway, or which region your family are from. So for me, that would likely be either the Trønderbunad or the bunad from Gudbrandsdalen, which I think is gorgeous. I prefer that one over the one from Trøndelag actually, because it's like black and you wear your white blouse underneath. It's got all this embroidery all over, and it just, oh, it's so pretty. And then you wear sort of a silver ring with little golden dangly bits from it. Words, it's called a sølje. It's just good stuff. And men wearing the male equivalent of those costumes. That's all I'm gonna say about that. But yeah, May 17th was a lot of fun in London, and after that I went up to Dalston and walked up to Stoke Newington where there's a yarn shop. And even in Dalston I saw one individual wearing a Norwegian little pin. There are some pins that you can wear. Anyway, that's enough rambling about that day for me. It's just such a fun day where you just talk about how lucky you are and celebrate by putting kids, you know, the future in focus, and sing lots of dorky songs and wave your flags and go hooray, and just a happy day. I miss it. But yeah, that was a bit of a Norway fun fact for you. Now let's talk more about knitting. I have been knitting more on my upcoming design, a very out of my comfort zone design, and I am loving the process of making this thing. I have affectionately called this project Floof, and I think that will be the name of the actual pattern as well. This is the Floof sweater, and this is what it looks like. I didn't show you much last time. I kind of like to reveal it in sections. The shade is kind of ruining it a bit. I hope it's brighter for you than it's for me. It has a very nice fit up here, and then there are some increases down here that contributes to the positive ease. And the positive ease is about 8 inches, so, and that mainly just happens down here. You can see more stitches are appearing, and a sleeve has also appeared. I'm working on the sleeve right now. I have actually managed to force myself through doing it with a 40 centimeter 16-inch needle all the way down. I may have just ended up stretching out the entire thing, but it actually looks really fine. I think there's something with the silk in the moor that makes it kind of bounce back again. Usually when I do it with pure wool, that doesn't really bode well, but this is actually pretty okay. I love the silkiness and the draperiness of this and all the fluff, and yeah, really enjoying it. I hope this will be, you know, well received, even though it's different from what I normally do. I think I have this like lingering fear that if someone else had done this, it would be a raving success, because it's like caters to a lot of trends right now, and I tend to cater to the more traditional things, but I hope I can reach out to that kind of target audience regardless. So yeah, I'll talk more about the yarn in the future. That's also another kind of fun reveal of this. I will be probably start thinking about a call for test knitters soon, but I will myself have to finish it first, because I'm not entirely sure how I want to execute the body. I have some ideas, but I kind of have to do it before I write it. Sometimes I am perfectly capable and happy to write the pattern before I knit it, but in this case I think I'd like to knit it first. My goodness, I'm quite blabbery in this episode. I always thought, like, if I was gonna make like an advice video for people wanting to podcast, my first advice would be to hide the blabber until the end, but I just can't seem to contain myself today, so apologies. Hope you enjoy it anyway. And if you ever would like a video on just like how to podcast and some of the kind of useful stuff and information about, yeah, how I podcast, and maybe also a bit of a podcast viewer guideline, because there are some like unwritten rules, and I think it can be really hard for some to know them, and that's kind of unfair. So it would be kind of good to do like a, yeah, rundown of like how to podcast and around that. It's an idea I've had for a long time, and I thought I'd do and just talk about how I do it and kind of how it works. But yeah, if you're interested, we could do that. I'd also like to do a Q&A episode. This is something I've kind of struggled with before, because I have a questions and answer thread in my Ravelry group, and I didn't make it for that purpose, but it has sort of been repurposed to be just sort of any kind of knitting help, which isn't really something that I offer. So it's a place where people help each other out, which doesn't make it the greatest source for me to pick questions for the podcast, although I suppose I could still do that. Or I could open a separate thread where I called it questions for the podcast, but I'm not sure if people would understand the distinction there, so maybe I should just stick to the one thread and be just selective to just how I want to be selective, really. I'm happy to hear your thoughts about that as well, and if you would like a questions and answers episode, in which case I'd probably put the call out on Instagram. That is really the easiest place for me to do that. Speaking of which, by the time I put this episode up, I will put a call out for making the child size version of this sweater out on Instagram. Now I have some criteria. Obviously, if you are gonna volunteer to test knit, it doesn't help if you have a closed Instagram account, because I need to be able to judge your knitting and photography skills for this. Yes, you could probably be a good test knitter regardless, but I have nothing to go by. If people that say they would do it don't give me any arguments of, and I usually just like going through people's Instagram or Ravelry page. So yeah, there should be a call out on Instagram right now. It will take a while before I get back to who I choose, but I will not be able to get back to everyone, so I will only tell the people that I choose. So either your choice or not, but it could take a while regardless, just because of, you know, I'm gonna be on roads. And I hope to send my pattern to a tech editor first, just because I will be relying on you guys to follow a good functioning pattern, and while I believe it is all of those things, it's good to have that checked first, because I don't think I will get around to knitting myself. I have no little ones to knit for. Like the youngest member of my family turned 19 yesterday. Apparently that means she's not a toddler anymore, so she's not a recipient of that kind of thing more. The sizes for that sweater will be age 2 to 12. I'm only sorting them into even number ages, but obviously, you know, if you have size 10 and size 12, it's fine if you have an 11-year-old to knit for, that kind of thing. But I will be kind of relying on your photography skills as well. It doesn't have to be great, but chances are one of you guys will be the, you know, chosen image for my Ravelry pattern page. I'm not going to be looking for sample knitters or anything. You get to keep all your things. It's all just the same test knitting procedure as usual. I'm mainly just making this pattern for those that have asked me. You know, so many have asked me if I could do a child size version, and I'm happy to oblige. So that's kind of why that is. So another work in progress is Hodgson's Joy. It's spelled accurately on my Ravelry page in the comment section, the description below. My progress isn't great. I did most of this yesterday, most post rib. So the rib I showed you earlier, happy to be done with that. And now I am just working this, what I call a slip stitch pattern. It's apparently tuck stitch, I think. You slip and then you tuck. It looks like this. And I have to do this for a long time, and it takes a long time. Very tempted to join around just because of my anti-purling tendencies, but I'm really glad to be using or doing something that is quite different from what I normally do. And this wool is a delight. This is the Lore yarn. That is an upcoming yarn by the Fibre Company, and this project is me being a better knitter for them and their new pattern collection that will come out in the autumn. And this is a Sarah Hatton pattern, and you know, she has a good track record with Rowan and such, and it's really skilled. And yeah, it's a well-written pattern and just very different from the style I normally knit. Not very. I got the pattern that was definitely the most up my alley, but given that I'm, you know, a notorious top-down knitter, it's a bit different in that sense, and I don't get to knit in the round. But I might, if I start to get worried about the time it will take me, I will totally just join it and streak it. But I think I'm alright. I'm enjoying it, and it was a lifesaver yesterday because I'd forgotten one of my shorter circulars. So when I got to the end of that mohair sleeve and I'd finished those socks, I was just kind of I am so glad I brought this because I wouldn't have had anything to work with otherwise. And yeah, it lives in this kind of a fake fringe bag that a viewer made me and sent to me as a get your yarn wishes granted. So not something that's up for sale. You'll have to get genuine fringe bags for that, which I also have done. But it's just really fun. It's like made in this sort of IKEA fabric. I love it. It's really great. It's slightly bigger than the fringe bags, so it should fit this entire cardigan once it gets to that size. Also, I've gone and done another cast on. This, oh god, everything's falling down. Let it just fall. The skeins can fall. They are a bit sort of floppy now because I'm knitting from the center. And yeah, I am knitting the Sans Serif cardigan by the amazing Elizabeth Dorothy, and who I had the pleasure of running into in Edinburgh Yarn Festival. It was really nice and unexpected. And I am making this cardigan for my grandmother. I have talked about this earlier. I had initially bought Quince & Co Lark yarn for this, and the more I thought about it, the more I was like, well, this yarn I had put into my D-stash bag because I'm kind of done with making garments in superwash yarn for myself, and just hadn't really considered it as part of my stash. And I wanted to use Lark because it's really nice and soft and warm for my grandmother. But it's always like this little worry in my mind that she's going to put it in the washer because she's getting quite old and confused. So it's safer really to use a Malabrigo superwash yarn. And this is the Rios yarn. And look at that play of colour. So yeah, I have done this much. I think I started this Saturday morning and today's Tuesday morning. It's the afternoon. Oops. Someone's been stalling this morning. And we got an armhole. We have 2 armholes. Love making the first bits of this because it's so fast. Like, yes, a bit of a slog working down the back, but then you get to cast from the fronts, and they're really quick because it's not really, you know, the longest of rows. And then you add some stitches here. Still pretty short width. Then you get to join for the underarms, and all 3 pieces are connected, and you keep knitting down. It's a method. I'm not sure if Elizabeth Dorothy came up with this or have reinvented it, or it's just kind of spokeswoman for it, but she did do this book. I have this book, that's where the pattern's coming from, and it's called Reimagining Set in Sleeve Design. This is the cardigan that I am doing. I'm sorry if I call it a sweater, it's a cardigan. The Sans Serif cardigan. And one thing I know is that my grandmother is not particularly keen if it's too fitted. So I am knitting it a size up from hers, although I may be knitting it a too tight gauge. The pattern calls for 5.5mm needles, and knowing my gauge pretty well, I know that a 5mm would have given me a 18 stitch gauge, a 5.5 would have given me 16, and the pattern calls for 17. So I figured, given I'm not sure how much yarn I would need based on what I have, I mean, I'm likely to run short, is what I'm trying to say, but my grandma is kind of short, so that can be worked out. I figured it would be safer to actually go with a 5mm to get slightly tighter gauge and do the size above her measurements, because the one at her measurements would have been 1 centimeter negative ease, and that wouldn't have been great for what she wants. So I think it will all be fine, and row wise I am pretty on point, so that's how that's working out. I'm using my Higher Steels, which is probably the most underestimated needles of all. I also said that about Knit Pro Novas, but I'm becoming a bit of a Knit Pro divorcee. I can talk about that in future. I could do a video of needles as well. I have a lot of thoughts about special videos to do apparently, and I'd like to do one about knitting needles. But yeah, Higher Steels are amazing. I keep saying Higher Sharps, so I mean to say Higher Steels. The sharps are the ones that are the kind of most well known by Higher. They are really pointy, and they're probably the #1 reason why my index finger skin is so rough. I don't mind, it's fine, but these are a lot more blunt, and I can do this without any pain, and they're perfect. They're perfect for yarn that has a bit of a fluff to them. So say knitting a mohair sweater, I would definitely opt for Higher Steels or Knit Pro Novas, not go for Higher Sharps. I would use Higher Sharps for a more round yarn, a worsted spun, more smooth, long staple, highly plied, all that kind of stuff, where it's not likely to snag on the sharp point. And here I'm just happy to use higher steels because I like higher steels. I'm sure higher sharps would work well for this kind of yarn as well, because Rios is a very nice and round yarn. As far as the superwash merino goes, not particularly pill prone, and I was initially buying this for myself, but the yarn kind of got a bit of sort of negative connotations in my personal subjective mind. Nothing wrong with it, just kind of realized I didn't feel like knitting it, although now I'm like, I wouldn't mind having a garment in this. If you know any other people that use this exact same base, I'd be very interested to know that, because it's just good to know where I can get this. I was really done with superwash garments, but this is really nice. I'm gonna see how it holds up when my dear grandmother uses it. And I need to hurry because they just moved into a nursing home and she's kind of confused about it right now. She and my grandfather. My grandfather is surprisingly happy about it. He was against the idea from the very get-go, and I was like, oh, it's great. They don't have a view, and that was his main argument against it. He's like, yeah, happy here. And my grandma was slightly confused by the change, a very sudden change. We don't do change in my family. And so I feel like either she'll be alright and she'll be herself again, or I really need to hurry about making this before she forgets who made it for her. She will love it. The reason why I am so certain that this was the right yarn choice for her is because, if any of you remember, more than a year ago I made the Spindrift shawl by Helen Stewart of Curious Handmade in the yarn by Third Volt Yarn, who is a London dyer, and Helen Stewart is a London designer, and I used the colorway Arctinian because Lola of Third Volt Yarn uses a lot of fandom based colorways. And I gave that shawl away to my grandmother for Christmas and she loves it. She wears it so much and talks about how lovely and soft it is. I think she's just been completely oblivious of how soft yarn can be, and wears it no matter the weather. If it's too hot, it doesn't matter. She just loves that shawl. It's just become very special. So I think actually superwash merino is right up her alley. I do think you do become kind of sensitive in some ways with age. And so I think, yeah, this is just perfect for her, and the colors, she's gonna love them. And I think they're really good for this pattern because it is a plain kind of canvas pattern where you are kind of been challenged to put in your own stitch patterns, whereas this doesn't need that. It's already patterning itself, and I'm feeling very confident that it's my grandmother's style. We all have this love for plum colors and burgundy in my family, so I really look forward to giving this to her. It does look a bit tiny now, but these kinds of shapes tend to look tiny until you add on the sleeves and everything kind of stretches out a bit. Now it's just sort of curling in itself because it's all stockinette, in case you were wondering. And yeah, it kind of fits me as well, but that would be a very kind of snug negative ease fit, and I do prefer positive ease as well. We don't like tight fitting garments in my family. We're just not that kind of people. We're comfort people. I'm wearing pajamas pants now. They're not really, I keep arguing that they're not pajama pants because I wear them outside because they are really nice when the weather is hot and just airy and, you know, prevents the annoying thigh rub, but they do look like pajamas pants. That's fine. So that was a work in progress. I am now just knitting and purling. That's all this pattern is asking for, and you know how I feel about purling, and I'm still doing it for the love of my grandmother. And you know, I worked up this much just this morning. I did a bit just as I woke up, and then I went on a good walk, and then I did a little bit as I was preparing the show notes. It's faster than I think. I just love knitting so much that I find purling a bit of a slog, but I actually think my purling for a continental style knitter is actually fairly efficient. I'm just moaning anyway. And that was my last work in progress for this week, I think. It's a lot of weeks that I started recently that you haven't seen for a while. They will happen when they happen. That's just how this podcast is. Like the Thripe Mew, for instance, I always bring it in my bag. Same with Alicia Beth, and I just work a couple of rows of rounds here and there, but it's not really worth showing, so I'm not going to. I'm just gonna jump right into acquisitions, because there are quite a few this week for a variety of reasons. First of all, got herself a new Pom Pom magazine. They had this magazine actually available for the Pom Pom event I went to about a week or two ago, but I obviously didn't buy it because I knew it was going to come in my mailbox. And then it reached me a little bit late because it was actually put in our mailbox, and we just replaced our door so that we had a little hole where you can shove the mail in. Letter hole. There are words for this. Please don't correct me. I know I'm being. Anyway, postman put this in the mailbox that's like technically retired. I don't know why. The old habits are hard to break, so I didn't see it right away, is what I'm trying to say. So I found it a couple of days later, and full of stripes. Lots of striped garments. I am so glad I have subscribed to Pom Pom, so please don't get me wrong, but none of these are particularly my style. But this is always the case with me and Pom Pom. Every time a magazine comes out, I'm like, oh, there's nothing in here I want to make, and then I sit and kind of ruminate on it for a while. I'm like, that one and that one, I want to have that one. Like, this pattern is really cool. This is a bag, basically, potential project bag. And I also really like the top by Anna Maltz. I could totally see this one made in Holst. She used Yoth yarn, but I don't see why you couldn't use Holst. So that's really lovely. Also, this shawl is really cool. So it's gonna grow on me. This is always the case with me and Pom Pom. I always have patience with Pom Pom. I think it's just I'm not cool enough or fashionable enough. But in the end, all these fashions, they grow on me. And then I'm like, oh yeah, it's really cool. And then everyone else is on to the next thing. It's just how I am. Another pattern publication that I have acquired is Woods magazine by Making Stories magazine. So they call the different magazines by different names. I believe the latest one is called Breeze, and I hope to see it in local yarn shops in the future. I haven't seen it in London yet, but who knows. Yeah, made by Making Stories, Verena Kors and Hannah-Lisa Havercup. And here we are. I really like what Making Stories are doing because they highlight, well, people like me, indie designers, indie makers. They really put them in the spotlight and are interested in them as business people. And I love that focus of not just like looking at these ooey gooey woolly ladies, instead just be like, you know, talk to me about your business, about your thing, your skill, your trade. That really speaks to me, and I think what they're doing and their focus on that is admirable, remarkable, and applaudable. Any other words I could think of that ends with blah. It's all those things. I think it's great. So in addition to having designs in here, you also get a designer profile or yarn profile. I'm just so glad that there's someone doing this, you know. So I had to buy it. I've looked at it for a long time and just been like, nah, I'm not going to. I'm not going to buy all the things. I'm going to buy all the things. Who am I kidding? I've had people actually kind of commenting on that before, and I'm not really comfortable with answering questions about how I can afford stuff. It's not really anyone's business, but in case you absolutely need to know, and I feel like I don't feel comfortable presenting myself as better off than I am. I live in a flat share in central London. We pay a stupid amount of rent, and I still only have one room that is mine. We don't have a living room apart from the summer when we have a terrace. I'm not living a luxury life. All I spend my money on is either rent, bills, food, and yarn and knitting stuff. Occasionally travel. I have no one else but me to spend money on, which is pretty good. I am relying on student loans and pattern revenue and the occasional job I do for my university. That is how I afford stuff. That's all where it's coming from. I'm not wealthy. I just prioritize. I don't go out and drink. I don't party. I don't like going to sports events. I don't buy expensive clothes. I don't live a luxury life, so whatever spare money I have, I choose to use it on my hobby and what I hope to become my livelihood, and it's becoming my livelihood. I do expect that when I cut my student loan, which I will be doing this summer, it's not gonna come, it's already not gonna come to me. I'm just gonna be living off the last bits of it. I will be buying a lot less, you will be seeing a lot less. But I have enough yarn to sustain me for a lifetime, so I don't really feel particularly sorry for myself. But that's really the whole story. There's just no magic to it. I just prioritize my money into my hobby, because what else would I spend it on really? Anyway, I have more stuff to show you. And this is going to be one of those things that I know I'm not going to be able to allow myself to buy in the future poor days unless my pattern sales just skyrocket. It's a very fancy bag. So background information, you will know that I bought this bag earlier and I love it. I bought the Plystre shoulder bag by Plystre, and they make bags for knitters essentially. So it's not exactly a project bag, it's more like a bag where you put your knitting stuff in, project bags and other whatnot. And it's a Norwegian product. I bought this from Knit With Attitude here in London, which is run by a lady coming from my hometown, and she is a bit in touch with what's going on in Norway as well. And this company is Norwegian and have their bags made in, I believe, Bulgaria, and is distributed worldwide, I believe. Wink wink. It's just lovely canvas bags with a drawstring and pocket in here. I've shown you this before, that's not why I'm showing you. I just want to remind you how much I love it before you judge me for my second purchase of Plystre bags, which is the Plystre rucksack. So it has a similar design as a front pocket, a lot larger than the one from the other one, the drawstring bag, the shoulder bag. This one has straps for the back. Not the most ergonomical straps. It's not something I would carry very heavy stuff in. I don't think that would be good for my back. It doesn't sort of put the weight of the bag on your shoulders. It sort of hangs. It's like a Fjällräven bag. It's more for style and fashion and practicality, not so ergonomic. That's fine. I love this bag. I'm so happy I bought it. And my floof sweater lives in a matching project bag that comes with the rucksack. Isn't that incredible? I just love that. All the rucksacks include a project bag, and it's not a small project bag. I thought it was going to be a fairly small one, like for socks or mittens or something. This is a big garment sized one. It's big and has a squared off bottom. I love this. It's a proper zipper. I only have good stuff to say about it, and I just feel really cool having a matching project bag to my rucksack. And there we are. I wish there weren't these gaps here, because even if you close the zipper, it's still going to be a hole. And I'm hoping to carry my laptop in this bag, because I do carry my laptop around when I choose to work from coffee shops and when I get sick of my own bed, really. I have a desk as well, but I like being comfortable. And before anyone says anything, the laptop I have is not heavy at all. So yeah, I can't really fit the whole thing in front of the camera even. It's really big, but yeah, I love it. I love a big bag, to be honest, and I just love it. So yeah, Plystre bags. I believe the woman behind Plystre is moving from Norway for a bit, but she's still going to keep her business running, because it's quite an international endeavour that she has started, and I'm completely impressed and amazed by what she's done. And I just love these bags. I have this thing for canvas bags lately. I wish I could make this kind of thing myself, and it's certainly a sewing goal of mine. But for the time being, I've got this and I'm really happy with it. And at the very last of this episode, I have been given some yarn support. I've told you in the last episode about how during the Mitten Club and the Mitten Knit-alongs I've been hosting, how that has given a lot of support through the production of the Excelana yarns by Susan Crawford. And in relation to that, I have very much been encouraged to make more patterns with the Excelana yarn, and in particular the 4-ply version of Excelana yarn, and that's what you're seeing here. I walked up to Wild and Woolly this morning to pick it up because it was still in the shop before being shifted back up to Susan, and it's quite the amount. I'm gonna try to pick it all up and show it to you. This is all the yarn. There, one went to the floor. I don't even know how I managed to carry all this stuff alongside my groceries. Okay, let's look at them all. Let's just like go through them. This is the sweet chestnut colorway, Nile green colorway, Himalayan blue, damson wine, and my personal favorite, ruby red. Nobody's surprised by that. This label that's nearly falling off, French rose, charcoal, English mustard. I love this one, this is great. Cornflower blue, also love this one. Persian grey, Sheffield steel, mulled wine. Land Army Green, Polypore, a Blåfjell, Dark Mandarin, Powdered Egg, and Siren. And I'm going to give you a close-up now. I couldn't bear to have them all focus on the camera, but just to give you an idea of the fibre. So this is a non-superwash, 100% English yarn. So I'm a little bit confused. Some of them say 75% Exmo Blueface, 25% organically farmed Polworth, but this one doesn't say anything. I'm assuming they're all made by the same stuff, and it's really nice. But fun fact, this is actually worsted spun, and as you all know, I tend to prefer woolen spun yarn for colour work, but as I said earlier, you can use any yarn you fancy in colour work really. It's just, again, depending on the effect you want. And with a worsted spun version of these kinds of yarns, actually what you get is a bit more of a compromise between colour work suitable yarn and more skin friendly yarn, essentially. It does become a bit rounder, a little bit less sticky, but also way more pleasant to wear. And as you will have seen if you've seen any of the samples of Susan Crawford's latest designs, she has used this yarn in colour work and they look really, really good. I think with a good block, I mean, I know that with a good block they will look really nice in a colour work garment, or I say mittens. And that is what I plan to do. Hope to make some mitten designs with these. And as you will remember, I did use my Susan Crawford DK Excelana yarn for my very first set of mittens, the first design I did, that is, and they work out really well. It does become a more round yarn when you have it worsted spun, and certainly if you add more plies, which the DK weight yarn has, and it's really lovely. So that is a pile of yarn I am now adding to my kind of yarn support stash. And I'm also looking straight at the Moods of Colour yarns that needs to be knitted up into a pattern very, very soon, because it's going to be part of the Moods of Colour along. It's a yarn subscription that she's doing, so you can essentially subscribe to 3 packets of yarn from her in I believe, I'm not sure what I can say about it, so I'm going to be a bit secretive about the base as well, but it's a really, really good sock yarn base from Dunarben Mills, as well as is Excelana, and I'll be using a bunch of colour to make a really cool design, and as will Commerbornia and Yarnesty. Now Yarnesty is a friend of mine who I've known since last year's Edinburgh Yarn Festival. Her name is Anna and she does a lot of sock designs. She's done other things as well, but socks are really her forte, and I've done, I think I knitted 2 of her designs that I've shown you on the podcast. So I'm really happy to be working with her, and I'm also super stoked to be working with Pia of the Commerbornia podcast. I have so much love and admiration for her and Denny's podcast. It's so nice. If you haven't checked it out already, I don't know what you're doing watching this stuff, because their entire podcast, like, I know you have to watch it because you need to read the Swedish well, the English subtitles, because they talk in Swedish, which makes it so authentic. But even despite that, you will not be able to pull your eyes away from just their lovely personal aesthetic that they just add to everything. Very Scandinavian and very lovely, kind of just, you know, takes me back home. And we really do have the same taste in yarn and design, so I really do appreciate that podcast in the podcast sphere. It's one of my personal favorites, and I do love Pia's designs. She has done some wonderful mitten and sock designs, and I have knitted one of her designs, the Shine mittens, which are definitely one of my favorite knits from last year. So it's going to be a very exciting collaboration. I've talked about it earlier, but it just made sense to cover it now and just kind of kick myself in the booty for not casting it on yet. But I have made the design and I'm really proud of it. It's certainly a little bit different from what I normally do, although, I mean, is it colour work? Yeah. And I think that's all I have for you guys this week. Thank you so much for watching, and as I said earlier in the episode, thank you so much for helping me out with the pattern name change of the Vinterfjell sweater. I couldn't thank you enough, and if you haven't already, I would really appreciate you changing the name of your Ravelry project, and most importantly hashtags on social media. If you want to change them to hashtag Vinterfjell yoke, Vinterfjell sweater, Vinterfjell cal, that would be great, because then people can click those hashtags to find out more about the sweater, and hopefully there won't be a hashtag Blåfjell sweater or Blåfjell yoke that people find and wonder, what is that pattern, you know? So, because it's not called that anymore. That's what I'm trying to say. So thank you so much for doing that. I promise I'm not going to go on and on about that in the future. It's just still kind of fresh news, and oh, you guys are making it so much easier for me. And just, I would normally have been quite stressed about the situation, but I'm actually not. And thank you so much. I'm going to stop blabbering now, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.